lower than the previous month when we have cyclic seasonal adjustments, but it's mainly stayed at the same level. So Brazil were able to increase minimum wage and decrease unemployment at the same rate. And this is one of the main virtuous circles in Brazil. Another important driver for the domestic demand was household credit. We do have a very important direct credit loans in Brazil, but we also have, in the beginning of, until the beginning of 2000 in Brazil, there was a very low household credit because income was also not growing as well. So when you had an important income distribution, then people were able to access credit, and this was very important. And I think the same way people are talking to China, I was in OECD last week, and they were saying Brazil's having a household boom, it's probably going to have a bubble, and also the credit is increasing too fast. People probably going to, you go to a crisis. They looked at the figures and they looked at this and say this is US, but they don't know exactly how the financial system in Brazil is regulated, which is completely different from the US regulations. You do have much safety, and as I showed before, income is increasing with the credit. You don't have income decreasing and credit increasing as it happened in the US. So in some sense, it's much safer increasing credit than what happened in the US. And retail sales grew a lot. Okay, this was one of the main drivers from consumption, but now I want to talk a little bit about investment. So as I said before, since 2007, there was an important program on infrastructure investments. And now the second phase, we still have it's called Growth Acceleration Program, which is mainly both economic and social infrastructure. And this actually helped the public investment. The public investment over GDP increased almost 50%. So the public investment rate increased a lot. It's around almost 5% of GDP so far, including both federal government, subnational levels, and state-owned companies as well. So if you take all three of them, you have a very, very large increase in public investment. And not only we do have those two figures here, these are state enterprises and direct administration investments, but you also have a very important BNDES loans, which during the crisis were very important. Of course, they're still very important, and they are one of the main sources of investments to companies. So both direct investments by the public sector and state enterprises, plus those loans, had a very important drivers to investments. So the Brazilian investment rate actually was very low in the beginning of 2000. Okay, it could be higher, but still it grew 5 points, which is not very easy to do in any economy. We know that increasing 5 points in GDP, it's not something easy to do. It could increase more. But this is in constant prices because people sometimes use investment rates in in current prices. But actually, as we know, the manufacturing actually had a much lower increase in prices. So if you do in current prices, then you have a lower investment rate. But this is only the problem of deflation, both because of the GDP deflator is greater than the investment deflator. So this is only a price problem. So in constant terms, actually, it had a better. And if you take here now, it's the composition of GDP, the growth of GDP. The green one is investments, and the blue one is consumption, household consumption. As you can see, although GDP investment is a much lower share in GDP, its contribution to growth was almost the same in many years, especially in the recovery part here. So this again is only to 2010. So investment not only grew much faster than GDP and consumption, but also have a very high contribution to growth during this period here from 2007 until 2010. Okay, but then we had a slowdown. The recovery, people were cheering a lot here, but then we had a steep slowdown. But if you look at the figures in 2011, almost in every country slowed down. Okay, maybe not all of them had the same, let's say, the tendency as Brazil. The tendency actually was almost the same, could be not as fast, but the whole world actually slowed down after 2011 again. The recovery was fast in some developing countries, but then the slowdown was for everyone again. And Brazil now is seeing some recoveries here at the last few quarters that we have been seeing. So the main question now is this going to speed up again, or are we actually just seeing a stop and go again? This is mainly what's been addressed in Brazil. And first thing I would like to say that based on our discussions that we have here is that people started saying that the model is it has ended. Okay, this was a model that was only able at that period. Now it went to restrictions that cannot go over. So the first question is, people said, okay, consumption cannot grow anymore, households are very indebted, and income cannot increase as fast as it did before. This is the first thing that we actually don't agree. But the main thing that I think we have to discuss in Brazil right now is the low unemployment. So people start saying, okay, we have a very low unemployment, so our GDP, potential GDP growth has decreased. Actually, they're basically saying that Brazil is in full employment right now and cannot grow anymore through labor. If productivity doesn't increase, then we are completely stuck with the low growth that we have right now. And this is interesting because first thing in Brazil, as we all know, we still have a lot of room to move people from low productivity jobs to high productivity jobs, which actually will increase productivity at the end, but it's mainly reallocating the same people in different sectors. And another important thing is that productivity, in fact, is endogenous. I think if you take the causality, it doesn't grow from productivity to growth. Actually, it goes the other way around, from growth to productivity. So what people are looking right now and say, oh, unemployment, labor costs is increasing too much, so therefore we have to stop increasing wages. We are we reached the top of our growth. Now we have to stop wages from increasing. We have to have a higher unemployment rate and things like that, which is completely, in our sense, completely not misunderstood in some senses. So actually, if you take the labor cost, unit labor cost increase that we have seen recently, is mainly related to the slowdown. Productivity slowed down with the growth slowdown because people simply did not, the labor in some sectors did not went down. And also there is a composition problem also because people move from different sectors, the sectors which are growing more, but with a lower productivity. But what is interesting to see here, as I will show later, is that right now we are discussing this. Is it low unemployment a bad thing? I don't think so. So this is one of the questions we are discussing in Brazil right now. The other one is infrastructure investment, which will continue to be an important source of growth, not only directly from the government, but also from the concessions that are being put up, and private investments as well. But private investments has an important thing. Except for private investment induced by the government, such as concessions, which in some sense are not directly related to the demand. Of course, it is in some sense. But private investment is also endogenously determined. Depends, of course, on growth. So what we have seen last year, there was a slowdown in investment. One thing was more methodological, not methodological, but a problem with, I won't address here about vehicles, but I will not address this. But the other part was we had come from a very high increase in investments and growth slowed down, so investments went down. I mean, we know that investment fluctuates more than GDP, this is normal, and that's what happened last year. And it's not related to any jurisdictional insecurity or things like that people want to say that private investment is not coming because now the government did this and that and now they don't want to invest. So just two quick figures here. This is US data since the 1950s. This is the first thing to say that low unemployment is not prejudicial to growth. Actually, it's the opposite way around. I mean, when we had the high growth, here's the green line is the growth and the blue line is unemployment. You had a higher growth than the previous period in average, and unemployment was lower than the average of the next period. So actually it's the other way around. When you're growing fast, unemployment is low, and this is not a problem. This is not something that will in some way restrict your growth. And another thing, as I was saying before, is sorry for the Portuguese here, I did not have time to translate this graph. But mainly is the industrial GDP and productivity in the industry, labor productivity, and they both go together. That's what happened in Brazil, and now actually productivity is coming back again, even a little bit faster than the speed up of the production. So for the next year, we'll still have we'll probably keep the same growth strategy, based on mainly three sources, I think. Internal domestic consumption will probably still be a very important engine to growth, not necessarily the main one, based both on income distribution, but we have to be sure that part of it actually be translated to production in Brazil as well. So this is the next slide I want to discuss. The other thing, natural resources. When you are a country that has natural resources, you cannot forget about it. So is it a blessing or curse? This is the main discussion that we should have. So actually, when you talk about natural resources, we're talking about linkages to the economy and how this actually prevents any Dutch disease and things like that. But actually, having a natural resource is very important also in some sense, to not depend from other countries' natural resources. Of course, you cannot use all of it, but if used in the right way, then it's a very important thing to have. And the final one is infrastructure investments that we still need to go. We still have a lot of bottlenecks that have to be addressed, and this, in some sense, and you need also the government to, in some way, allow this to happen, either directly or in the concessions plan, making the regulatory changes that need to be done in order to induce this. Because infrastructure investment is not something that any firm will decide, no, I'm going to infrastructure because this is the way I'm going to raise money. This is a very tough investment. It's a long run investments. The returns are in a very long period. It's very risky, so you do need the government in order to allow this to go. And this will be done both economic infrastructure and social infrastructure, which has been raising a lot in the last years. And now we'll come to, I don't know how much time I still have, but okay. We'll have to improve international competitiveness. This is one of the things that we have been addressing in Brazil, and we know this, both to exchange rate management. This is important in some way. We do have a currency that overvalued, we know this, or was at least. I don't know exactly how it is right now. Depends on the day you look at the figure, but infrastructure is important to also increase international competitiveness, tax reforms to be less regressive, less based on production, reducing financial costs related to both interest rates and how the long-term maturity of energy costs, qualification of labor force, which is very important, science and technology.